Hi everybody, this is Justice. This is me and Amani's midterm tutorial. I am currently about to go through questions 4 and 5. So starting off with question 4, which is the scores. The directions ask us to write a function to calculate the mean scores for male and female students for files in a selected list. Your function should use the template, our code. Our template output should be A and B. So going back to part 1, we get our directory right here and we load it. We're going to read our entire directory 1 through 100 in our function find mean by gender, starting off with an empty vector of results. As we go through each directory, we are going to read it. We're going to take out the male scores, see the grade, gender, male, or M, because that's what the chart uses to signify males. And then we're going to take out the same for female values or female scores. For each, we're going to take the mean, and then we are going to bind them in a row in the results vector. So by the end of this, we're going to have an entire vector entitled results, and then we're going to make that vector a data frame. Right here, we created a name for each row, male and female, and then we want to print out our results at the end of our function. So we're testing our function here. We have find mean by gender scores, which is our directory, as you can see right here. And then we want to look at files 3, 5, and 9, which is in between the 1 and 100 files that we have. So for files 3, 5, and 9, our function should read through them, create a data frame, and print it out. So below, you'll see that we ran our code right here. First, you have to set your working directory. Always remember that, or your code won't work. And then we ran our entire code, and we tested it right here and right here. As you can see, this looks exactly how it's supposed to look on our worksheet. So just to compare the two, they're the same, so our code works. Okay, now off to part 2. It asks us to write a function to identify the files in which average scores of male and female students differ more than a given threshold. Apply a t-test and report the p-values. You should then use the template or code functions below to test your code. So the difference between part 1 and part 2 is part 1 simply asks for the mean scores between the males and the females of whichever file that the inputter or the user wants to get. And then part 2 is asking for the average scores that are above the given threshold. And right here, the threshold is 70, or the threshold is 6. So it's asking us to take the mean, and then the difference between the males and the females, given that number, if it's higher than the given threshold, which is 6 in this current example, we're going to apply a t-test and then report the p-value. So let's go to our code, part 2. Again, we are going to use the function from part 1. I had to rename it to part1 underscore template.r because I never changed the code name or the file name from what was given to me right here. So it's going to input that data. The function is going to input this data and the find mean by gender function that we used in part 1. And then in part 2, we also need the test with threshold function, which is right here. And it's going to include a directory. It's going to include the number of files and the threshold, which in our case is 5. we are going to do the same thing that we basically did in part one as far as reading through the directory. Instead, our empty vector is going to be entitled p-values. For the length of the file, we are going to read through it, and then we're going to get the grades again for both males and females so that we too can get the mean. And instead of just taking the mean and putting them in separate columns, we're going to take the absolute value of the difference of the means right here. And stated previously in the directions, we want to take that average and see if it's greater than the threshold given to us. So we're going to use an if statement. This if statement says if the absolute value of the mean difference or the average difference between the male and the female scores is greater than the threshold given, then we are going to apply a t-test for both male and female values. And then we are going to get the p-value from the t-test. As stated in the directions, we want to report this p-value if the mean difference is smaller than the threshold. So we are going to test our two functions given, and below we already did that ahead of time. And as you can see, for the first one, you're given scores, and then you want to look through the files 1 through 5. We have our data set right here with the males and females from 1 through 5. And then we're going to take the mean difference from each column, see if each column has a threshold higher than 3.5 or has a difference higher than the threshold 3.5. And if it does, then we're going to print out whatever p-value that our function spits out. And currently we only have one. And then for the second one, we're going to do the same thing. And then we're going to spit out a p-value again. So let's see if it's similar to what was given to us. As we can see, our output should look like this for the first one. So here's the first one right here, or yep, for the second one, I guess, in our case, it should look like that, which we have, and then our second one is actually missing values. And I wonder why that is. Nope, actually it's not. It's correct. Okay. Then for number 5, they gave us a for loop already, and it just asks us to make the for loop work without completely replacing the question mark. So something I did based off the job of programming I did last year at Stanford, I changed it a little bit, but I think I might have changed this particular part too much beyond the question mark point. I believe that was my issue. So to correct that, let's see if what I fixed works. So we are going to go back into our exam file, click on number 5 folder, make that the working directory. We are going to run our code. So right now we have a vector called x, a bunch of numbers in it. We are going to use the for loop to get all the negative numbers out, I believe. So for what I did, it actually works just the same. You get all the negative numbers. But what we were supposed to do was not change the question marks at all, which was actually a lot simpler. Just say for I in x, so I meaning the index in the vector x. If that index or that number at that index is less than or equal to 0, meaning negative, 0 or negative, we are going to print out I. It's very simple code. I think I just made it harder on myself by completely changing the question mark and actually using I as an index instead of just using I as a number, if that makes sense to you all. So those were the two codes that I wanted to show you all, and that is pretty much it. Thank you.